we're getting a Boys of Tommen TV show. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know, my name is Faith and thank you so much for watching. In case you haven't heard, we're getting a Boys of Tommen TV show. As your go-to adaptation girly, obviously, I gotta report on this, guys. At the time of filming this, it was just announced yesterday, so at this point, we don't have a ton of information about the show. Even though it was literally just announced yesterday, I have already seen so many rumors about the show that can be easily disproven by reading the short article. When I say the article, I am referring to the Deadline article, which is a highly credible source for film and television news. And it's a combination of people read the article and misinterpreted what was being said, or people just didn't read it. So I'm going to go through the article and kind of clear some stuff up for you guys. There's another article about the show by Amazon News, which is a very credible source for Prime Productions, which, in case I didn't say it, this show is being adapted into a show by Amazon Prime. The Amazon News article says basically the exact same thing as the Deadline article because they're both using an interview with Nicole Clemens, who is the international content chief for Amazon Prime. Since they're essentially the same thing, but the Deadline article is a little bit longer, I will be referring to the Deadline article in this video unless stated otherwise. However, I will link both articles in the description below if you want to check them out for yourselves. And guys, I'm not going to memorize this article, so I will be reading it off of my phone. And it will be cutting out some unnecessary parts, so I'm not going to read this thing word for word. So without further ado, let's get into it. Prime Video is adapting Boys of Tommen with the producers of Twilight, The Summer I Turned Pretty, and One Day bringing the stories to the screen. The Prime Video series will span the first two of Irish author Chloe Walsh's 6-book series, with Poppy Cogan penning the scripts. So there's a couple things to address there. First, the fact that it says the series will span the first 2 books and not just a season will span the first 2 books. The reason they're saying series and not season 1 is most likely due to the fact that they have not been greenlit for a season 2, which at this point in time is perfectly normal. 99.99999% of the time, they will not be greenlit for a season 2 before the show has actually been released. And obviously, there are exceptions. For example, Off Campus was just greenlit for season 2 today, even though season 1 doesn't come out until May. If there's a lot of hype and interest, yes, they're more likely to be greenlit before the show actually comes out. But if there's not a lot of interest, and in this case, I've seen a ton of backlash for the adaptation, so it most likely will not be greenlit before the show comes out. And if the show flops, it most likely will not be greenlit for a season 2. Usually, it depends on how well it performs. So if it performs very well when it comes out, they are more likely to get it greenlit for a season 2. But sadly, we have seen multiple times that shows that do well don't always get greenlit for a season 2, so there is a chance that it will only be 1 season. And I would like to point out that the Amazon News article did refer to it as season 1 instead of series. So while at this point in time it is only greenlit for 1 season, which would be Binding 13 and Keeping 13, that doesn't mean that we will never see the rest of the series. It really just depends, and sadly there's not much more to say about that than that. And the second thing to discuss about what I've already read is the fact that it is being written by Poppy Cogan. For those of you who don't know, she is the writer for the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder adaptation. And if you're curious about how accurate that book to TV show adaptation was, I actually did an entire video on that comparing the book to TV show adaptation, so you guys should go check that out. While I definitely encourage you to watch that video, I will just say there were definitely a lot of changes. Now that was an entirely different series, so that doesn't necessarily guarantee that that will happen with Boys of Tommen. However, I have reason to believe it will, and I will touch on that more in a moment. But for now, let's continue with the article. And again, I'm skipping over the irrelevant parts. Boys of Tommen is a sweeping romance told across 6 books. The streaming series will take in the first and second novels in the series, Binding 13 and Keeping 13. Drama Republic, Temple Hill, and Whip are sharing production duties on the 8-episode series alongside Amazon MGM Studios. Production is slated to start this year, meaning the show could hit Prime Video in 2027. So kind of more of what I just said. They're only greenlit at this point for 1 season, which is why I'm assuming they're referring to it as a series. This also gives us confirmation that they will be sticking to their 8-episode format. And season 1 will be covering both Binding 13 and Keeping 13. And I would like to point out that the Amazon News article does say that a release date has yet to be announced. However, that does not mean that this article is incorrect when it says that since production is starting this year, it could hit Prime Video next year. Because it could hit Prime Video in 2027 still technically means a release date has not been announced yet. But I just wanted to point that out. The show will follow the forbidden love story of Johnny Kavanagh, the star rugby player on the verge of a pro career, and Shannon Lynch, the talented but painfully shy new girl at the prestigious Tommen College in Ballylagan, Ireland. Both teens are hiding secrets, Johnny a potentially devastating injury, and Shannon a troubled and violent home life. For some reason, I saw a TikTok comment this morning of somebody being like, oh my gosh, I really hope they don't cut out Shannon's home life. First of all, that is one of the most central points of the story, so I don't know why you would think that in the first place. However, if for some reason you also thought that, this confirms that that will not be the case and it will be included in the story. Now to what extent, I don't know, but according to this article, it will be included. And then Chloe Walsh said, quote, The response from readers around the world has been overwhelming, and knowing that everyone behind this production and book shares my passion for telling the story authentically means the world to me. And before somebody misinterprets that as fans are super excited for this production, because if you're on the same side of TikTok and Instagram that I am, you know that that is not true. I would just like to clarify what she's saying with that. When she's saying that the reader's response has been overwhelming, she is referring to the reader's response to the books and not the production. The reason I say she's referring to the reader's response to the books and not the adaptation is because she said this before any fans knew that the adaptation would happen, so there's no way she could be referring to our reaction to the show. However, the rest of what she said, referring to the passion of the people behind the production and the book, is referring to more technical side of things, being the people working on the production and the people in the publishing company working on the book. Hopefully that made sense. I apologize if it did not. And after that, there are 8 paragraphs not about Boys of Tommen. They are just about Nicole Clemens talking about her future with Amazon as the international content chief. And since that's not relevant to Boys of Tommen, I am going to just skip over that, except for one thing she says, which I would like to point out, because a lot of people are worried that they're going to Americanize the show, and what she said in this article does disprove that. She does say, quote, "What I've been communicating to producers and to talent is that we're making stories and shows for the UK. We'd love the show to travel, but they are not being reverse engineered. They are largely British producers, British writers, IP, and talent." AKA, she's doing what she was hired to do and isn't Americanizing the international content. And before somebody says, Boys of Tommen is Irish, it's not British, and it's not in the UK, again, that was her referring to her work as the international content chief as a whole, not necessarily for Boys of Tommen. I only used that quote from her to show that she's not Americanizing it, because that has been people's worry. But to kind of add to that, I will say Ireland is very small. They most likely will be branching out to the UK to find both talent and crew. So this most likely will not be an Irish only cast and crew. It could be, who knows, they might find the perfect people who are Irish to do it, but again, Ireland is small, so they most likely will have to branch out beyond just Ireland. But again, that does not mean that it will be Americanized, as people have said, so stop saying that. But continuing with the article. Bringing it back to Boys of Tommen, the Prime Video exec said, "It's just an unbelievable constellation of characters, but it's also got such a specificity for place and the time. It talks about abuse, about bullying, about mental health, and it's about love. It's a romance series." I think that is very straightforward. However, I would just like to point out something that I have seen a lot over the last 24 hours. I've seen a lot of people saying things like, oh, they're gonna dwindle it down to a romance series, but it's not a romance series. It's about, just like they said, abuse, bullying, mental health, things like that. Yes, it is about all those serious topics, but that doesn't change the fact that at its core, it is a romance series. And quite frankly, I don't like how people are talking and kind of like degrading the romance genre as if just because it is a romance book, it cannot discuss those topics. The central part of the story is the romantic storyline between the 2 characters in each book. A very central part of the story is that Shannon is abused at home. Does that change the fact that the story is still about a romantic relationship? No. A book or movie or TV show can be a romance and still focus on those very serious topics, and I just find it very weird that people are acting like it can't. Regardless of what or how many serious topics are in these books or in this show, that does not change the fact that at the end of the day, it is a romance. And I'm sorry, but I just needed to rant because that has seriously been annoying me for the last 24 hours. But back to the article. With 6 primary books in all, is this a franchise in the making? Who knows how many we do, but hopefully it goes for a long time, Clemens said. There's plenty of material and plenty of incredible, rich characters. And that kind of goes back to what I said earlier, that even though right now it has only been greenlit for 1 season, and that season will be covering Binding 13 and Keeping 13, that does not mean that in the future they will not continue the rest of the series. But then to finish out the article, it says, Kogan is lead writer on Boys of Tommen and also an executive producer alongside author of the series, Walsh, and then it just names more producers from the production companies. Like I said, the article is short. It probably just seemed longer because I was going through and explaining pretty much everything that they said. Hopefully that clears up some things for you guys. Pretty much every rumor I've heard is disproven in that article alone, so I definitely think it comes from, you know, people read it and probably didn't understand it, or like I said at the beginning of this video, they might just not have read it. That is everything we know about the show so far. However, we're not done. I definitely feel like I'm one of the few people who's actually excited for this show, because yes, I'm a book girly, but I'm just as much a film and television production girly, and I love seeing things that I love being adapted onto the screen. That being said, I do have one very large concern, and that is the fact that they will be putting both Binding 13 and Keeping 13 into one 8-episode season. And the reason that I am so concerned about that is because, for those of you who don't know, one script page is roughly the equivalent of 1 minute of screen time. These two books together are 1,590 pages. And these pages are actually bigger than one script page. But we are going to be generous today and say that one book page equals one script page. So one book page equals 1 minute of screen time. Again, that is being very generous. We would need 26 and a half 60-minute episodes to get 100% of the content in these books to make it to the show. But they are doing 8 episodes. And whenever people talk about the 8-episode format, they always say that the episodes are an hour long, but they're not an hour long. They're an hour long with ads. So they usually come out to about 40 to 45 minutes. But again, we are being very generous today, so we're going to round up and say that they're going to be 50-minute episodes. That would be 400 minutes, which would be the equivalent of 400 pages, which is 25% of these two books combined. So for time purposes alone, they will have to cut out 75% of these books. Because of how much they're cutting out, they definitely will have to add or change things so that the storyline can still make sense. So this 25% that we're working with is more likely going to come out to about this. So that is where my concern lies for this series. But even though I'm concerned, I am still excited to see what they do with it. I see other people having two big concerns, and that being the cast and new fans for the show. The main concern I've seen for the cast is that they're going to Americanize it, but I already discussed earlier that you don't really need to worry about that. The other concern for the cast is that they don't think Chloe Walsh will pick a good cast. And to that I say, while sometimes it happens, authors rarely have the final say over the casting for the adaptation. So right now, I really don't think that you guys need to be freaking out about that. And then, like I said, the other big concern that I've seen is the new fans. This fandom is already insanely toxic, so I don't really see how it can get much worse, and that toxicity flag has been flying the last 24 hours. I just think it's kind of ironic that the people complaining about new fans are the people who are spreading toxicity and hate in this fandom in the first place. And these people aren't even just hating on new fans who, mind you, don't even exist yet. They're hating on people for being excited for the show. I saw a comment yesterday where somebody literally just said that they've been wanting an adaptation of the books, and then somebody responded to them and was like, then I fear you didn't understand the books on a deep level. Like, no girl, I feel like you didn't understand the books on a deep level because you apparently read these two books where a large theme is bullying, yet you proceeded to get online and bully somebody because they're excited for a TV show adaptation of a book series that they love. Make it make sense. All that to say, I find it odd how people are more worried about new fans than the disgustingly hateful ones that already exist. Even though they're gonna have to cut out a lot, I'm still excited to see what they do with it. Do I think the show will live up to the books? No, but I am still holding out hope that it will at least be good. And at the end of the day, if you don't want to watch the show, you don't need to sign a petition for them to cancel the show, you just need to not watch it. And I really think it's as simple as that. And with that, that is all I have for you guys today. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow my Instagram and my TikTok, which are in the description below for more bookish content. And if you're not a toxic, hateful fan, I hope you have a fantastic day. Love you guys. Bye!